Right now, you are sitting somewhere comfortable. There is a door with a lock. There is running water. There is a flush. For 99% of human history, none of that existed. And the 1% who invented the flush weren't even the first humans to think carefully about where waste went. They were just the first to do it indoors, with pipes. So how did ancient humans actually handle this? The answer involves botany, social behavior, specific digging techniques, a parasite record preserved in 10,000-year-old sediment, and one very surprising discovery in the buried remains of a Neanderthal camp. No bathroom, no soap, no privacy screen of any kind. And still, they survived. Still, they built cultures, raised children, maintained health long enough to pass on everything they knew. How? Here's where the story gets strange almost immediately. Everyone assumes that prehistoric sanitation was purely improvised, that early humans squatted wherever, moved on, and didn't think twice about it. The archaeological record says otherwise. In 2018, researchers studying paleofecal samples recovered from several Neanderthal sites across Spain published findings showing concentrated deposits of human waste clustered at the edges of occupied cave spaces, not scattered randomly through them. The clustering was deliberate. These deposits were separated from hearth areas and sleeping areas by a consistent distance, roughly 5 to 10 meters, based on spatial mapping of the cave floors at sites like El Salt in Alicante. Neanderthals weren't leaving waste everywhere. They were leaving it in specific places, away from where they ate and slept. The behavioral logic is identical to what every outdoor camper is taught today. Waste at distance from camp, downwind, away from water. The timeline predates modern humans in Europe by tens of thousands of years. That is not the behavior of an animal. That is planning. But what about before permanent camps? What about the 200,000 years before Neanderthals, when hominins were fully nomadic and leaving almost no physical record at all? Here's where biology fills in what archaeology can't. The human digestive system is built for a specific rhythm. Gastrocolic reflex, the automatic wave of intestinal movement triggered by eating, fires reliably within 30 to 60 minutes of a meal in a healthy gut, meaning early humans almost certainly had predictable elimination patterns tied directly to eating schedules. A group that ate together at dawn and again in the late afternoon would have had consistent, nearly synchronized biological urges. Field primatologist Jane Goodall documented this pattern in chimpanzee communities at Gombe Stream Research Center in Tanzania, across decades of observation beginning in 1960. Chimps consistently deposit waste at the periphery of sleeping and eating areas, moving specifically away from food sources before doing so. This isn't learned behavior in chimpanzees, it's instinctive. And because humans share 7% of their DNA with chimpanzees, it is almost certainly a biological inheritance rather than a cultural invention. The instinct to separate waste from food almost certainly predates modern cognition entirely. It's not hygiene as a concept. It's hygiene as an evolutionary reflex. So here's where the record gets specific. In 2016, researchers at the University of Cambridge, studying coprolite samples, fossilized feces, from a Neolithic site at Çatalhöyük in Turkey, dated to approximately 7,500 years ago, found evidence of multiple intestinal parasite species, including Trichuris trichiura, the human whipworm, and Ascaris lumbricoides, the roundworm. The samples contained eggs from both species in quantities that indicated active infection across the population. This is not surprising on its own. Parasites are a constant of pre-modern life. What was significant was the spatial distribution of the coprolite deposits around the site. Samples were concentrated in a single area at the edge of the settlement, separated from the central living area by more than 15 meters. A community of roughly 3,500 to 8,000 people, Çatalhöyük was one of the largest Neolithic settlements ever found, was managing its collective waste in a coordinated way. The parasites are the evidence that it wasn't always perfectly executed, but the spatial pattern is the evidence that it was deliberately attempted. That's not primitive sanitation. That's a public health policy without a government to enforce it. But there is a twist in this story that no one talks about. Everyone assumes that the invention of toilets and indoor plumbing was an obvious upgrade, more hygienic, less disease, cleaner lives. The epidemiological record from the transition period suggests the opposite was briefly true. When human populations began concentrating their waste in single locations, latrines, cesspits, urban sewers, they accidentally created high-density parasite environments that accelerated infection rates rather than reducing them. Piers Mitchell of Cambridge University published a 2016 analysis in the journal Parasitology tracking intestinal parasite prevalence across the archaeological record from prehistoric through Roman times. His finding, intestinal parasite rates in Roman-era populations, who had access to public latrines and sewage systems, were equal to or slightly higher than those in hunter-gatherer populations without any fixed sanitation infrastructure. The shared latrine was a transmission hub. The innovation that was supposed to improve health inadvertently optimized pathogen spread for several centuries before soap, germ theory, and water treatment eventually caught up. The very thing designed to protect them made it worse. For a while, what protected early nomadic humans in ways that latrines initially failed to replicate was movement. A band of 20 to 50 people, covering 10 to 20 miles of territory per week, simply didn't stay in any one place long enough for waste-borne pathogens to cycle back into the food or water supply. The transmission window for most fecal-oral pathogens, the route by which intestinal parasites and bacteria spread, is roughly 2 to 4 weeks under natural conditions. Move fast enough and you outrun your own contamination. This is one of the underappreciated advantages of the nomadic lifestyle that sedentary agriculture later had to compensate for with engineering. There was also plant knowledge. Archaeological evidence from multiple sites suggests that hunter-gatherer groups used specific plant materials for cleansing: leaves with known antibacterial properties, rough fibrous bark, grass. In 2020, a study published in the Journal of Archaeological Science examining plant micro remains embedded in dental calculus and sediment layers at sites across sub-Saharan Africa identified residues, consistent with Combretum and Terminalia species, both of which have documented antibacterial and anti-inflammatory properties and are still used medicinally across the continent today. The use of these plants wasn't limited to food or medicine. Their presence in sediment layers near waste deposit zones at several sites suggested active use in hygiene contexts. These people weren't ignorant of antiseptic properties. They just expressed that knowledge through botany rather than chemistry. Here's the thing that reframes everything. What ancient humans had that modern sanitation took centuries to rediscover was behavioral integration. Hygiene wasn't a separate activity scheduled into the day. It was woven into movement patterns, eating rhythms, spatial awareness, and accumulated plant knowledge passed from generation to generation. The absence of a bathroom was compensated for not by ignoring the problem, but by building the solution into the structure of daily life at a scale so basic it left almost no archaeological trace. The evidence that survives, the parasite record, the spatial clustering of waste at campsites, the plant residues, the Neanderthal cave deposits, is fragmentary. But what it consistently points to is a picture that looks nothing like the improvised, unthinking mess that most people imagine when they hear the phrase before indoor plumbing. Right now, somewhere, there is a person waiting for their automated bathroom sensor to detect them and turn on the lights. The sensor responds in 3 seconds. The plumbing took 4,000 years of civilization to build, and the behavioral instinct underneath all of it, stay away from your own waste, keep it away from your food, use what the land gives you to stay clean, is at least 400. 000 years older than the toilet, and hasn't changed once. The engineering changed. The biology never had to.